Hey everyone, great to be here, bright and early in LA time anyway. And yeah, so we have Eric Hanson with us today to talk about the power uh, of reality within the virtual. Eric does amazing work. I met Eric, gosh, it must be 15 years ago, at one of the immersive meetups, I think, or maybe it was a Dome Fest. He's a faculty member at the School of Cinematic Arts at USC and CEO of Blue Planet VR, which is he's going around scanning heritage sites and all kinds of cool places. He has a background in design, architecture, photography, feature film, visual effects, which hopefully Eric will talk about a little bit, some amazing work he's done over the years. And he creates volumetric VR and experiential content spanning landscape, natural history, cultural heritage. And at USC, he leads a curriculum in cinematic VR and visual effects. Yeah, he never gets enough sleep. I know, Eric. So anyway, without further ado, Eric, why don't you come on and take it away?
Great. Let's unmute myself. Good morning, everyone. Let me go ahead and share screen to my first slide while I open up here. Let's see, let's do a few things here. Okay, and I think we're good. Everybody sees that all right? I suspect. Is that good, Ed?
Got it.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, everybody. Boy, it's so great to be back in the Fulldome world. I'll kind of show some earlier work that I had done in this community many years ago, and just thoroughly enjoyed my time in Fulldome. And just how could you not? I mean, it's a great community, it's a great media, and just loved it. But then I ventured into the faraway lands of virtual reality for the last probably 9 years or so, and done a lot of exploration there. But I think it's time to come back home to the Fulldome world for me. So that's kind of what this lecture is about, is some of the techniques, case studies, and techniques that I've developed along the way that kind of span these different media. I've worked in traditional visual effects, in features. I've worked in IMAX, Fulldome, and VR. And I think what I'll show you at the conclusion is, I think, a way that I can combine or kind of disseminate or deploy to all those different media from one authoring process. And that's actually what I'm working on now, is kind of just a personal art film as a production test to see if that's doable. So anyway, but to get started, when we talked about doing this talk, I think the thing that encapsulates my work in this field is kind of capturing the real world. And I'll talk about that, about these pivots that I made. And one was the rejection of fiction toward kind of real world, I dare say documentary, but more natural history and cultural heritage. And it's just been a wonderful phase of my career and lifetime to be doing what I'm doing now. But anyway, let's go ahead and get started. I've got my, and I know it's very early here for us West Coasters. I've got my Ron Swanson coffee mug, if you can see that. So, but yeah, hopefully I'll be waking up more and more as we go. So let's get started. Let me hit the first slide. And this is just a very quick couple lines about my background. I kind of said all this already, perhaps, but am now running just a small studio called Blue Planet. Before that, I was with Greg Downing in X-Ray Studio, and that's where we did a lot of the dome work originally. But these are the things that I do, and I teach in the animation and digital arts program at USC. But funny thing is, I don't do really any traditional animation, no character animation. So I tell my students, I can't help you with any kind of performance issues, but I can certainly help you with the worlds that they live in. And that's been my background, and I'll talk about why that is. But that was kind of the work that Greg and I did at X-Res, and I'm doing now, is really kind of capturing and communicating, I think, what are very important locations in the world, using these different types of medias. So that's my fascination in what I do, is those areas. I have three major pivots that I'll just kind of briefly talk about. Before I move on, just to talk about USC real quick, these are the classes that I've set up and teach. And I brought different instructors in to kind of take over while I teach others that I've just created, that type of thing. But this will give you an idea of the kind of work that I do in any case. This is a short little reel. I'll just let this loop. And this is, I'm known for my field trips. I bring students out to the Mojave Desert to a wonderful place called Red Rock Canyon. And we basically do all kinds of capture techniques. And I'll cover these techniques toward the end of the lecture. And this is panoramic imaging, it's photogrammetry, it's HDR. It's all the kind of real world capture techniques. And then so we just have a great time teaching the students how to do that. You can see kind of before and afters on a few of these. And then it's up to them to kind of turn it into their own fictional world based on the real world. Of course, this is not what I'm doing. Actually, I am kind of doing this at the moment with my art film. But generally speaking, I'm trying to talk about real world as opposed to fiction. But what a great way to begin to create worlds. And this has been just a really fun thing to do with my students. Okay, let me move on. My background, ultimately, my education and initial career was in architecture, but I quickly got enamored with 3D graphics. This is back in the days of Unix and Intergraph, big CAD machines. And so, which was pretty much out of reach. Desktop computing hadn't really arrived, so I worked for these very large corporate or kind of commercial firms that had the investment in these machines. And at night, I would stay in and I would start to explore 3D modeling and rendering with them. And I just became hugely smitten and enthusiastic about it. And spent, my off hours kind of exploring what could be done. So I did quite a bit of kind of, original work in architecture with this kind of very early adopter of this kind of work here in LA, but we did all the work for the movie studios. So we renovated the Sony Pictures lot. Those of you in LA probably recognize that early render of that. And Paramount and so forth. And that led to an opportunity to moonlight on, I think it was Batman Forever way back when. And that's kind of, so again, if you live here in Los Angeles, we call the film industry the industry. And it's probably inevitable that you'll brush up, if not, work heavily within it at some point living here. And that certainly happened to me. But in any case, what I wanted to do was this is Jurassic Park days, is I recognized the opportunity that I could bringing environments and architecture in. Because at that point, all CG was creatures and kind of effects at that point. So I developed a portfolio and worked for a small firm doing a ride film, actually for NHK, a company called SimX, Simulation Experience. And that led to some work that got me on a digital domain in the early days of that company. And I had the great opportunity of kind of heading up the digital shots of New York City for The Fifth Element. And I didn't realize, it's really kind of funny on that film because I didn't realize what a unique opportunity that was at the time. I just thought every film project was like Fifth Element, which is actually not necessarily true. That was actually a very unusual project, but my background in architecture lent itself to creating this future vision of New York. And as a matter of fact, but the interesting thing I just wanted to dwell on just for a moment is that this was also a very unique time in visual effects, where it was really the entry point of digital artists entering the field, which was primarily optical and physical before that using miniatures. So the shot you see on the right looking down is actually a combination of miniatures, CG, matte painting, live action. It's a huge amalgam of different techniques that at that point in time was really kind of a magical brew or kind of magical technique. Now today, of course, everything is done strictly with CGI or more heavily with CGI. But at that point, it was really kind of a magical thing. And again, so here's an image of one of the model builders on stage building that. And then, so what I was able to do here was execute a number of shots that needed to be digital of the city or integrated with digital in different ways. So what you can see here is a background image on the lower right of the cityscape up above, which is 3D modeled by my crew. And then down below, Kevin Mack, a great visual effects artist and map painter, painted kind of this underworld or kind of lower scale of the city. And then with a little bit of 3D modeling touched in for the bridge, these foreground miniatures were in fact miniatures, 1/24th scale, kind of similar to where you see the artists on the left with those models. And these were shot on stage, of course, on green screen. And then this interesting mix, the final shot, which is full-size boat model on a hydraulic apparatus, and then CG engine that I created for the bottom, and then just composited together. So this was actually kind of, I think, a unique thing at that time, or kind of a pivotal or kind of nascent type of technique, which flourished pretty heavily. And of course, now we're kind of relying more heavily on digital at this point. But this also led to another show I was on Day After Tomorrow, where we built Manhattan. We set extended. You can see the left image of kind of the lower scale of the props, basically the backdrop, and then extending those digitally and creating obviously the digital water. But this was, and I'm not going to go through all these films, but the one that really made a huge impact on me was Castaway. And I kind of ended up on this film, I don't want to say accidentally, but kind of to fill time. And so I helped enable some of the digital backgrounds on this. And this was really pivotal for me because I've always been heavily interested in, and invested in the outdoors, either in I used to be a hang gliding pilot. I used to, mountain bike, mountain climb, still do a lot of these things. I don't hang glide anymore, but used to do all these things. And I love the outdoors. So this was an opportunity to learn how to recreate nature and natural environments. And for me as an architect, this was very new, but it showed that, wow, this is entirely possible as well in a digital arena. But you can see actually what was physical and what was digital. This is actually just up the road from Tom Hanks' house in Malibu, so it's just off of PCH. But in fact, we did shoot in Fiji a little bit, but that was mostly, as I recall, yacht removal, whereas a lot of the environments were fabricated digitally, either on stage or with graphics like I was able to work on. But the first big pivot, or second big pivot of my career was having worked in the field for many, many years. I was up in the High Sierra in front of a campfire with Greg Downing, and we were lamenting how visual effects had kind of turned into a commodified situation where the pioneering days maybe were beginning to wane, and the films weren't necessarily getting better to work on. They were kind of becoming more commodity type of titles rather than auteur work. So as a result, we were kind of, I don't know, just sitting around drinking beer and lamenting all this. And it was like a lightning bolt. We said, there's got to be something better to do with our shared knowledge. And it's like a lightning bolt hit me in the back of the head, where it was like, look around you. What about the real world? Why are you fixating or concentrating on fiction when there's eminent things you can do with these techniques based on what I learned on Castaway in the real world? And it was because I led two divergent paths. And then it's like, why don't you combine these and, make this your path? So that was a huge thing. And then we started a company shortly thereafter, and called X-Ray Studio, standing for extreme resolution. So our initial bit of tech that we were researching and trying to adopt is called gigapixel imagery or photography. And this is stills, but it could be used, or we did use it, and I'll show you a video here of how it can be used for visual effects or for full dome. And this was a very new thing at the time, and we kind of came up with some initial technique. We worked with a company called Peace River that gave us this early robotic device. And then we programmed it to kind of oversample the world, in effect, like use longer lenses and get what we thought were huge images at that point. Actually, not as big today. but this is probably, gosh, I don't know, 14 years ago, 15 years ago. So at that time, if you look at the statistics, you can see this was 73K by 36K, 2.6 gigapixel. Today, don't know if I'd say 10 times as large, but easily 5 times or maybe greater is being accomplished now. So, tech always advances, and the opportunity, the scale of it always gets higher. But at this time, this is really kind of something. So this was one of the first deployments or captures we made of the Eastern Sierra. This is the Alabama Hills. And this was a 70K by 35K. These little insets are one-to-one insets of what you can zoom into in the image. And again, small fry by today's standards, but at the time it was kind of magical. And of course, this is a 360 capture, so this could be used as the basis of an environment for filmmaking. So, but we still continue this a little bit. A few years ago, Greg and I got back together and we did this big capture of El Capitan in Yosemite. I'm going to cut away and show you. Wait, hold on. Here we are. Wait. Oh, hold on. Let's see. I get to the right place. And here we are. So this is on my website. Let me know, Ed, if you can't see this. But this is basically a page that contains one of these large images. And you can see this myriad of climbers on the wall. And that was a special thing we did here. So let me double click this image. And what I'm going to do, this looks fairly small, but in fact, as we roll into the image, we can see some climbers starting up on what's called the nose, famous climb. We can go in and see them in pretty high detail. These are in fact the same climbers. Let's see if I can get it right here. There we are. And this is Roger Putnam and Eric Sloan. Next time you're in Yosemite, Eric works in the Mountain House restaurant and bar, so you can have him offer you a drink. But in any case, top shelf climbers. So we shot them with a 800 mil lens and just kind of followed them up the whole route as they were passing all these other parties. They did this whole route in 7 hours, which is pretty amazing. And then we went back the next day and then shot this is Texas Flake. And then we went back and shot the whole wall from the same station point with the same 800 for the baseline. So what Eric does is he sells books and routes that will help climbers understand what they're going to be tackling on these climbs. But in any case, and this is printed in the visitor center on a ginormous print. I think it's a 12-foot print of this in the visitor center next time you're in Yosemite. So anyway, so we got very fascinated by that, and that was all good fun, but along came Fulldome. And I think Greg had worked in the dome before at the Gates with Dan Neefus at DMNS in Denver, and he'd done showed some of his panoramic work. And I saw that, or he shared that with me, and I said, well, we should, take this further into three-dimensional work with this. And then later came VR, just kind of combining these two just to save space. We created a piece called Crossing Worlds, which was a we entered this in, I think, the original Dome Fest back then, and got to show the community. But this was just kind of a production test of taking some of our capture techniques and seeing if we could use it as a device to make films with. But we also then started doing a lot of work for different directors and productions, ENS and Spitz and so forth. This is one for Tom Lucas's Super Volcano. I think what I'll do is I'll show a video now. Let's hop over to this. And this is kind of the breakdown of how this shot was done. This is fairly short. Let's see, this is, 2 minutes. So I'm going to let this play. And this shows how gigapixel, turn the volume down just a bit, was actually used. So this is the kind of the aggregation of all the shots. You're just kind of using a long lens and then stitching those together into a very large image. Okay, and once we have that, we bring it into a 3D app like Maya, and then begin to lay it out in perspective, and then begin to kind of cut elements, whether it's terrain, people, clouds, effects. And then here's the final shot rendered out of, this is actually back in mental ray days with Andrew Hazelden's great lens shader that could do full fisheye. And this is just showing a cut. This is working with a geologist, working with some science data of where the magma really is, which is actually scarily close to the surface that I was not really aware of. And this is one long pullback. I think this will cut before the end, but you'll see entering frame at the bottom should be the beginning of this tendril of magma, which in fact, if you look at the real data, turns into a ball of magma that is half the size of the state of Wyoming and crosses the border with Idaho. It's actually fairly terrifying. And but anyway, you all may know this film from years past in Fulldome. But again, just a way to kind of utilize 3D and gigapixel to kind of illustrate this kind of terrifying scientific fact. Let's see, does this keep going? Yeah, this I'm just going to skip through. Whoops. So there it even gets larger. All right, so let's cut back. Anyway, along the way, we also had great opportunity to, a student of mine became a director for Bjork, and Bjork wanted to do a full dome piece for MoMA in New York, so we worked with her on ideas about that. She didn't end up getting all the funding for that, but we ended up doing all kinds of VR work for her, which was just a terrific experience, and we used all kinds of capture techniques that aided what she did do for her retrospective of MoMA. We also had, and Ed knows all about this because he provided the dome for this. This was a project with the great artist Ai Weiwei. And this is a collaboration he did with the Navajo Nation with a Navajo artist. It was a land art event. And so you can see Ai Weiwei's piece being kind of laid out with this crew. And behind it is Burt Benali, the Navajo artist, his great piece. And this is actually a fascinating kind of fire event. So people drove out to this remote location where the long walk began in southern New Mexico. And it was a very powerful experience using fire and under a moonlit night. At one point, this earthen pot broke away and revealed and cast iron plumbing fittings fashioned into a corn stalk. It was white hot, and it was just a powerful thing. So we ended up doing photogrammetry of this entire canyon and created a dome film to celebrate this piece of work. After that, we got kind of really bitten by VR and started working with John, the kind of startup, the great startup at that time, and creative studio here in Santa Monica. And we kind of sweet talked them into sending us around the world to some places we wanted to shoot, like Machu Picchu, and created a couple films for them for their catalog of titles. And this was, again, a really great way to kind of explore how storytelling could be. Like Machu Picchu, one thing nobody knows about is that it sits on a promontory of land. Everybody knows that. But it's actually on an axis that lines up with the sacred Apu or peak of Salcantay. And above that is the Southern Cross. And of course, the Milky Way, the celestial sphere, perfectly mirrors the Urubamba River. So we showed all this in stereoscopic 360 in the headset, and it's a real treat to kind of see, how magical that location is. But here's the big thing, and this is kind of what I mostly want to show, is that along the way, Greg had worked on some pioneering work with early photogrammetry and the rise of computational photography and Paul Debevic's early work. Photogrammetry started to advance really rapidly. This is probably 9-10 years ago. And today it's become very, very easily accomplished, relatively. And so it's basically a way to capture the world without having to model yourself a lot of detail. And laser scanning had been around. Laser scanning is terrific, and it actually still offers a lot of value and use for urban environments. But for nature, we found that photogrammetry actually can be a great alternative. It just requires a simple DSLR for high quality work. And again, the processing of this has now gotten very accessible. It used to be super high processing. But now with GPU advances, it's pretty speedy. And this opens the door to what's in VR is called room scale. and this is 6 degree and 3 degree, which I'll talk about in just a moment. But the cool thing is, and this is what I'm working on right now, is that there's very little experimental or kind of artistic work I've seen done with it. I think that's going to change. This is actually one of the first photogrammetry pieces we did for the Morrison, for Ryan Wyatt up in San Francisco, for a film they were working on. And this was, yeah, pretty early stuff. I think this was Image Modeler, I forget, but a very early software package, but showed the promise of using it in Fulldome as a means of image making. So we got very excited by that. And then Autodesk took note of what we're doing, and they said, "Can you travel around, capture a number of natural locations, bring our laser scanner with you, and do a point comparison of where one is superior to the other, or how they compare?" And so I saw this as a great opportunity, so I gave them a list of, oh my gosh, it was Angkor Wat, and obviously Machu Picchu, and all the great locations, the Andes, and I thought this is going to be the ticket for an amazing trip. And they said, well, we were kind of thinking maybe just California. So I said, well, okay, that's fine too. So we readapted our pitch to some really great locations in the state. So here we are in Mono Lake with these sand tufa. These are very highly detailed little structures. You'd have a really hard time modeling these from scratch. And so here it's showing just how simple photogrammetry is, using a carbon pole and a tripod to record a background panorama in HDR, and then, if needed, the laser scanner. And I'm not going to go over all these tips. What these are slides from, I wanted to mention, this is from a class that Autodesk asked me to do for Autodesk University. And it's a summation of all the techniques that we use. And what this is online, I'll show it to you on the last slide if you want to download this, if this is of any use to any of you. And it's really just kind of bullet points of proper technique and kind of how you go about this. But here's one thing in photogrammetry. I do a lot of custom rigs. So this is a custom rig we developed with 3 cameras all slaved together, with shooting HDRs in a way that we could use for these. And I'll show this at the end as well. This is the Megao Caves in China. It's a priceless cultural heritage site. But here you can see the 3 cameras being shuttered, or kind of the position of those cameras. And luckily they had like a, I don't know, a 10-inch tile floor, which made it very easy to kind of align the cameras to. So again, and I'm not going to belabor you with technique, but this is just, interiors are one method compared to exterior. Exterior is actually really interesting because it can just use a carbon pole and mostly handheld. So here in this kind of chaotic point cloud that you see, that's me walking around this cultural heritage site, hand holding, trying to shoot for all visible surfaces or occlusions. And then you can see the little shots up top. That's the pole being used to elevate the camera and shoot down to get the ground surface. Now, of course, you can use drones, but that's can be prohibitive in certain sites. And I'll talk about that in just a second. But here's the end result. So that's not a photograph. That's a 3-dimensional model that's created from it. And it just staggers me the amount of detail that is possible, the acuity and the resolution that you can get from photogrammetry. And that's one of the keys that I want to mention at the end, why I think this technique can spread across multiple media, because it has this scalability factor, which is fairly profound if you do it right. So let's move on. So this is, again, a slide, just a summation of all the techniques that we used in XRES and I still use today. At the low end, let's go to the very small. There's a device called the Gigamacro that Gene Cooper, our associate, sells. He has a company called Gigamacro that we helped him with. And this is a device to do gigapixel in scanning of very small microscopic objects, or small scale macro. And so then moving up from there would be more terrestrial, or kind of human scale. In that case, we use photogrammetry, laser scanning, or HDR panoramas. This pano rig you see with a lens, that's actually a motorized unit that can shoot stereoscopic 360, which is kind of a nice thing to do. Not as useful in full dome, definitely useful in VR. And then as we need to elevate the camera, we obviously use drones, and moving up from there, I do a lot of this where we'll charter helicopters, Robertsons, or fixed wing, and capture things aerially. And then above that, I spent a lot of time kind of coming up with pipelines for this, is using DEM data, digital elevation modeling, which is basically terrain data that's readily accessible from a site called National Map Viewer. And that's free USGS data downloads. And as a matter of fact, this one on Antarctica, they just released, I think about 2 years ago. And this is an extraordinary level of detail. So there's a great foundation that you can use or kind of extend these landscapes out using satellite imagery. But here's the last pivot point, and this is where, you know, we were using all this for either full dome filmmaking or other filmmaking. And somebody back then said, you know, the Vive had just released a really nice headset at that time. And they said, why don't you take one of your photogrammetry captures and bring it into real-time, into a real-time engine? And I had avoided real-time my whole career up until that point. And Greg kind of learned just enough to get his model in there. And this is a model of an Egyptian tomb that he shot over in Egypt with Nat Geo on a job, and the small little space. And so he put it in there, and I call this our Watson Bell moment, where he put it on for the first time and kind of gasped and said, "Eric, get over here quick." And I put the headset on, and I got chills down my spine. I was just like enthralled with the effect of presence that it gave me. And I'll talk about that next, why that is. But it was truly a major turning point. And at that point, I just said, okay, I know what my third act's going to be in my career. It's going to be all this and nothing else. And that was 9 years ago, and it's still the case. Every day I work on this technique. I love it. It's just, to me, it's sheer magic. And I just am enthralled. So what this is, and the reason for that magic is that it's in filmmaking and in full dome, and not to diminish full dome. Full dome has all kinds of advantages over VR as well. Each has their place. But full dome or filmmaking is 3DOF. So if you look at a film, like say we did for John in Machu Picchu, as great as that stuff was, if you have omnidirectionality, it's omnidirectional filmmaking. You can look in any direction. It's fairly exhilarating, but your brain knows better, and your brain goes, no, well, it's kind of cute what you're doing. It's not real, because, you know, as you're shifting your weight in your chair, I don't see any parallax. I don't see any movement. So clearly you're just kind of doing a cute little thing. Whereas in 6 degree with the real-time engine to the far lower right, you can see you actually feel like you're present in the world. And that's because it's rendering in real time through a gaming engine. And the beauty of this, of course, is you're feeding neural information you don't get from 3DOF. And your system kind of accepts it and starts to get fooled and goes, okay, well, maybe I kind of might be in this place. I don't know. And it's not so profound that you truly believe you're there, but it's a really great trick. And it's enough to create this sense of exhilaration that I love. So that's one of the magics of VR. And again, I'm not going to debate the two. Actually, I will debate the two at the end, but not even debate, but just talk about how, whoops, sorry, let me go back. I think I hit the wrong key. There we go. Oh, shoot. Okay, sorry. Let me go back down. Yeah, here we are. All right, we're back. Sorry about that. But anyway, so lastly, I'm just going to show a few case studies. This is a terrific, one of the most remarkable opportunities I think either Greg or I ever had. And this is working for a foundation. It's actually Mimi Gates. It's Bill Gates's stepmother, who is an Asian art PhD. She runs the Asian Art Museum in Redmond, and is a great philanthropist, and has spent her entire life studying the pinnacle of Asian art at the Magao Caves in the Gobi Desert in far northwest China. So we were approached to help them and capture some of these just remarkable, cultural heritage, priceless, uh, you know, uh, creations, I'll just say. And these are caves that there's 500 of these in a row on a cliff out above above a wash, far out in the Gobi Desert. And although it is a major tourist area for China, and nobody here in the West really knows about Miguel Caves. I teach quite a few students from China at USC, and they all know about this. They're like, "Oh yeah, no, I went out there as a school kid." But nobody here in the West really knew of it. I didn't know it, and as we met with them and they shared these images or images of the caves, I was just like, oh my God, I had no idea. And it was a major bit of cultural history regarding the Silk Road. It was under Tibetan rule at one point. This is you can see Buddhist mandala on the ceiling and different iconography of Buddhism. This sculptural structure in the center was not original. So these are very ancient. These are probably 1,000 or more years old. The sculptures in the center are only probably 200 years old, as I understand. And some scholars opposed that little cluster. Of course, I thought it was terrific. And as you walk around, so anyway, what we're looking at here is the photogrammetry that we've shot. If there's time, I can put a headset on and just kind of take you through one of these and show you how this is. This is really the greatest project Greg and I ever worked on, but it's never seen public dissemination. It's used for fundraising and for kind of, I don't want to say internal, but it's used for different promotional purposes for the foundation. But anyway, just going through, here's another cave. And the other funny thing about this is I used to think these are all for veneration and for Buddhist practice. Turns out they were kind of done for karmic reasons for the wealthy merchants in that area. This is a key location on the Silk Road. And this particular town had just an immense amount of wealth in it. So the wealthy merchants, as I understand, created these kind of to create good karma for their own lifestyle. So it's not necessarily a temple that's shared by many, but a lot of these were sealed up for many years as well. So fascinating backstory to this whole site. Just if any of you find this interesting, so you fly to Beijing. From Beijing, it's a 5-hour flight over, would that be westbound, from Beijing to the site. Remarkable little town, beautiful, nice hotels, nice restaurants. It's not it's a lot of airtime, but what a great location to go travel. And very few Americans. I think we saw one American the entire few weeks that we were there. So yeah, it's just put it on your radar, and it's a terrific location. In any case, so then the third pivot was me splintering off. Greg wanted to keep doing service. I wanted to make a product. So we splintered off and now been developing for the last 5-6 years a product I call Blue Planet VR. But it's basically just a collection, kind of a manic quest to scan capture as much remarkable places that I know about as possible, and then put those into a product that I can offer these experiences to others through virtual reality. So these are all a selection. I have 100 of these total. These are just a small grouping, but again, these are all locations that have been captured with photogrammetry. You're seeing the 3D models from all these. And it's just been, a great pleasure to work on this for a number of years. Here's some stills from it. So here's the 3D modeling of a Buddhist temple in Indonesia called Borobudur, which again is another wonderful place to visit. But you can see the visual acuity of this is very high. So, and that's the other thing that just enthralls me is that you can really achieve, there's no, loss of fidelity with a lot of this. I ventured into Carlsbad Caverns a number of years ago, and I thought, well, this would be impossible for photogrammetry. And I did a small test and came back and discovered that it actually, I believe there's probably nothing that photogrammetry can't do. There are some things that I'll mention in closing, but largely speaking, it's like for natural environments, it's actually kind of stunning. So here's the final rendering using the aggregate of all the shots that were taken. But again, that level of fidelity just amazes me. And so anyway, and this product is the basis of a lot of my personal interests in cultural heritage and other locations. This is a phenomenal site north of Bishop, California, that has one of the few sky-facing rock art panels. And this is one of the great panels in California. And it's difficult for a lot of people to get to, so this is a nice way for people to feel present and examine this large panel from different points of view. I even have an aerial option where you can see it from overhead and see it in a way you can't see it even if you visited there. I then had a great fortune of connecting up with a large Buddhist organization in the Bay Area, and this is ongoing work, and traveled with them to Bodh Gaya, India, to capture the Bodh Gaya temple, which is the site of the Bodhi tree, and just found this to be an amazing site, and had the great opportunity to get permission to capture it from everyone, and again, destined for VR, like that shows. This is an early idea of what that application would be, where you could be in this environment and be able to choose these little spheres. It's kind of evolved a bit from that. The interesting thing is this environment came from a fevered dream I had in VR one night. I woke up all sweating and like, oh my God, and I was inside a massive human eye, seeing the beauty of light filtering onto the retina at the back. And I thought it was just so terrific, and just I just had to act on it. So I bought an eye model right that morning and rendered it out, and it was one of the most nauseating things I've seen in VR because of the veins, and the inner eye is not actually that beautiful, but the space I thought was. So I abstracted it into this environment. So that's why you see that rounded image on the back. That's kind of where the retina would be receiving the image. But anyway, long story short, this has been out on the market now for 4 or 5 years. It's on, we just released on Apple. It's been on the Quest primarily. It started off on Steam. And again, I spent all this year up until about 3 weeks ago getting it, moving it over to the Apple headset, which again is a fundamental shift in VR. I'm convinced. I've been doing VR for a long time, but I'm kind of feeling very reinvigorated for what the Apple headset offers. It basically offers human level of acuity. So gone is any kind of pixelization. Gone is poor color fidelity. It's an OLED display that is 60 pixel per degree out of the 90 that we have in our eyesight. Quest, by comparison, I believe, is somewhere around 17. And the other fact I always say about this, for every pixel on your iPhone, there's 54 pixels on the AVP display. It's just a remarkable display. And I'm enthralled by it. And so I spend a good deal of my time in my studio demoing it for friends and others who would like to see it. And so it's been, it's an amazing device. And I think it has great opportunity for us in the Fulldome world to share what we do and to kind of crossover, fuse the two communities of XR, because the XR community, extended reality, encompassing AR and VR, they're aware of Fulldome, but they don't really know too much about it. So this is actually, I think, a great solution for us to kind of fuse, to join the tribes and just get more empowered, maybe have some channels that we can get financial remuneration for some of the work in Fulldome, et cetera. So anyway, so I'm pretty excited to see where this goes. Anyway, here's a little, this is like a 3 or 4 minute teaser. I'll play a few minutes of it. And this is, and this is it's just kind of my marketing video, but you can see a little bit of pre-rendering and a little bit of real time of what these environments are. So I'll just let this play. And again, what you'll see here, one of my attractions to the site this is actually from a Fulldome project, but one of my criteria for capture is something that's largely spatial. And so this is all encompassing space. Obviously, nothing better than a cave for that. This is a title just on caves in the Mojave and Carlsbad. These offer some real challenges for capture. Volume down a little more, but I'm very fascinated by the spaces that these contain, and to feel those in a VR headset. Obviously, I have great interest in temples and cultural heritage, so this is another great topic. This was a shoot in Bali last year for another VR project, but and this is the Bodh Temple that I mentioned. This is en route to Everest Base Camp on a trip many years ago. This is in New Delhi. Okay, and let's see, what do we, oh, and then now the other interesting thing about hang gliding, or I'm sorry, about VR, is that you can, if you capture it, especially aerially, these are all captured from a helicopter or fixed wing. You can recreate hang gliding flight or any type of flight. And so this is actually a panorama I shot of my old hang glider. But here it is in the Apple headset where you just pinch your fingers to aim and fly. And it's just totally exhilarating, especially in the Apple headset. And then geology, of course, I'm a big geology hound, more for the sculptural and kind of formal aspects of what exists out in nature. Great site in North Bishop, outside of Sedona. This is in Utah. It's a place where they rappel down, so I give you the point of view from rappelling down the thing. And more of these sites. I think this is almost all Utah. Okay, so I'm gonna pause there, but this keeps going. If you go to my Vimeo page, let me start this correctly. All right, here we're back. Okay. But anyway, I can give you a link to a Vimeo page if you want to keep looking. But in any case, let's now, to start to close. This is the thing that I think may have interest to this community, is that I'm embarking on this basically art film that will span across all these different media outputs. And this just is a slide, kind of a pitch deck to talk about what it is. But the important thing here is that I'm creating a 16K square top bottom stereo, but I can reconform it to all these other deployments. I was greatly influenced by Jerry Ullsman in photography in the 70s and 80s. And when he was Photoshop and assembled imagery long before digital. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to be producing a VR title on stereo photography with another pioneer in the field, Lauren Mears, a good friend. And Lauren has done some amazing work with stereo light painting, large format stereo light painting. It's pretty much everything possible from back then. But beautiful, beautiful work. And he was a friend of Jerry. So we just spoke about Jerry recently. And he mentioned that he had 10 enlargers. And he would assemble these different elements on each enlarger and just take the paper on a registered jig on each one and just do a major, so kind of like Photoshop layers, but done with a multitude of enlargers, which I didn't know that fact. That was kind of interesting. But anyway, it just occurred to me at one point, I looked at this image and I thought, wait a minute, that could be photogrammetry. So there's ways to abstract photogrammetry into an Ullsman-like kind of heightened or fictional world. So this is just one example of, maybe the way that it could be color graded. But here's the most important thing, which is how it could be reconformed. So I'm starting with a 16K lat long, top bottom. That'll take care of the resolution required. This is somewhat 12K. People are debating it, but arguably about 12K on the Apple headset. Could easily go over to 8K full dome, and this would be more traditional. This is actually a 30-degree tilt, which many of you know about for a tilted theater. This is the gates, I think, the layout that I have. And then, but it could also be a vertical 8K for new venues like COSM. And then, of course, it could go out to giant screen at 6K based on the calculations I've made. But I've worked on many IMAX films at 4K, so I think it's within that parameter, unless they've risen up, which they may have in recent years, but still sufficient. And then lastly, I'm formatting this for a unique immersive venue called the Cinechamber that a colleague of mine named Not Human runs out of Gray Area venue up in San Francisco. So, and it's a collection of 10 1080, or in this case 1280 720p projectors that span around for immersion. So this is going to be formatted for that, and I'll display that this November. So I'm hustling to kind of get that along. Lastly, this is the last thing, is that there is a new photogrammetry, I didn't mention this, has some certain limitations, very significant limitations in many cases, especially in urban environments. There's no light capture, no specularities, no material reflectance possible with it. You'd have to add it back in. A lot of people do this in UE, Unreal Engine, and so forth. But nonetheless, and I can't capture very fine detail, like human hair. These little cables here may cause trouble. A big issue is foliage. Any kind of trees have the topology that far exceeds the number of polygons that this room would have. Like one bow of leaves could easily outdo all the polygons required for this room. So that's another reason why I shoot desert terrain oftentimes. I don't have to confront those problems. But let's move on here. And again, I'm not going to go into all this, but just suffice to say that photogrammetry, we're going to see a big shift. It's starting probably, well, by the end of year, I think, hopefully, we're going to see some significant tools that will allow it. Some people believe it's happening now. I'm actually working with my programmer and colleague this weekend to look at one of my scenes taken over. We'll see how it looks. But and this is using AI and machine learning to do the heavy lifting. My problem with this at the moment, it's moving almost too quickly. Every week, there's a new technique or what have you, and I'm just waiting for it to be an embedded tool in a real-time package or in a photogrammetry package that is usable. I'm more of a tool user than a tool builder. So anyway, but I think by end of year, if most assuredly next year, there's going to be a big shift over, and it's going to make things even more magical about the things that I've talked about capturing the real world. So lastly, if you want to go to get those slides, the slide stack on that presentation, don't worry about this long URL. Just search for Autodesk University Hanson, Hanson, and you'll find this page. Whoops, sorry, I don't know why that zoomed out. Okay, weird. And you can download any of these here, free for the taking. Again, feel free to reach out to me anytime, questions, whatever. I know we'll have a Q&A next, but that's my email, and happy to chat with any of you. But man, exciting times. I mean, technology never ends, and things get better and better. But, and I tell my students this all the time, it's good you've waited until now to do some filmmaking in this area, because it's just such an amazing time. But more better in the future always. So but wow, what a great time. So anyway, over to you, Ed.
Wow, Eric, super impressive. You're the master, yeah, thanks for sharing all that. Amazing work. The one question that popped up in my mind, looking at all the awesome scenes that you've captured, is what do you do if something's moving? I mean, deserts and caves and heritage architectural sites and all, they tend to stay still. But what happens if there's trees moving or there's something going on? I mean, if you're like a city street and there's cars zipping by, just curious how you deal with that.
What I say about people is you either have to freeze them or kill them if you're going to capture them. but so I avoid people at all costs. But actually, people, interestingly enough, unless you're trying to get them, movement in photogrammetry software will be any movement or discrepancy in detail features between the image sets will be seen as artifacts and will be disregarded. So unlike panoramic stitching, where you have to eliminate or paint out figures in photogrammetry, they kind of automatically disappear on you, which is kind of interesting.
You mean the person disappears altogether if they're moving?
Yeah. Yeah, they're seen as an artifact. So even if if you have, let's say, 500 images and you have a person in one position in one area, and as long as they're moving, so like when I shoot areas with, I have to deal with crowds oftentimes. And the worst thing is somebody who stays there for 15 minutes, so it's kind of like you want them to kind of keep moving. But as long as they are in motion, they can be in your frame and the software will solve eliminating them, which is kind of neat. Leaves and things like that, that's tougher. That's, again, photogrammetry doesn't handle foliage anyway. So, but water, can't do water. And I didn't really mention this, but what photogrammetry struggles with is, obviously movement, but reflective things without features, blank walls. That's where laser scanners come in. So typically, if you have a capture that is urban or man-made in some way, you probably are going to use a laser scanner and photogrammetry together, and they work well together. So that's kind of nice, but yeah.
So NERFs and splats, they do handle some of those things, right? Like reflections and reflective surfaces.
Yeah, and I see Jenny is here. Jenny can talk all about videogrammetry of capturing performers, and that's a whole other thing. And that's you don't have to freeze or kill somebody for that. You can actually record a matrix of video capture cameras and enable 6DoF capture and performance. And that, of course, is a terrific thing. And Jenny's doing great work in that area. But I'm strictly more on the environmental side. Did you want to say something, Jenny?
Oh, I would just say that if you wanted to capture performance and put it into a photogrammetry environment, you can do that. So for instance, if you have a photogrammetry environment and then you want to add performance to it and you capture that in volumetric, then that performance could go into that environment. And it's something that some of the IP that I was previously working on and we'll pick back up soon, I'm sure, was looking at exactly that.
Absolutely. Like I say, it's not my domain, but that's certainly doable. But I think what you were talking about, Ed, was like problems that arise from movement. And so photogrammetry, like I say, can't handle water reflection, transparency, hair, any of those issues. Splats will help. There is some full motion splatting going on now that I'm seeing, which looks terribly exciting. Again, not my domain, but that's going to be emerging very soon too.
Right. Well, if anybody has questions, feel free to pop them in the chat or raise your hand. Mark Davidson has his hand up. Mark, do you want to come on camera and ask your question? Or
yeah, let me know. My camera's not on. Sorry. Hey guys, thanks so much, Eric, Ed, and Ryan, and everyone for hosting. Eric, just as by way of introduction, I have a little dome theater out on Catalina Island here that showcases my underwater movie called Ocean Wonders. So it's shot around the world in AK 360. I'd love to connect with you afterwards, potentially. Yeah, and so this is kind of along the lines of what Ed was talking about with different environments that don't necessarily lend themselves to photogrammetry. I try to dabble a little bit in it with some underwater stuff before, and that was where I kind of wanted to go. You said reflections on water. Have you seen much underwater photogrammetry? I've seen a few shipwrecks and things, but is there an issue with shooting through a water medium instead of through air, and how do you get around those things?
There's I don't know if you're aware, but there's a major effort. I think they've accomplished it by now, but it started I think 2 weeks ago to capture the Titanic in unprecedented photogrammetry. They designed a very elaborate custom rig and a ROV to go down and do very high resolution scans of it. It already had been done before, but this is going to take it to the next level. But anyway, no, you should speak to Greg Downing, my ex business partner, who has done a lot with underwater. He used to teach, actually, he taught a workshop in that at Wrigley Institute on Catalina, right?
Okay.
USD's
Yeah.
thing. So, but anyway, yeah, no, it's definitely possible. There's color grading issues. There's actually been some great papers on how to basically eliminate or work around the fact of scatter in the water and plus the coloration, right? So, but yeah, no, it's very, very doable. And of course, the fact that you're floating free form around a subject makes it incredibly, you can't do that in real life.
Right.
So, without a drone. So it's really kind of wonderful in that way.
Well,
I don't practice it myself, but yeah.
One thing, sorry, just one last point. One thing that your landscape stuff and the caves got me thinking about was that the challenges of doing it in the ocean with visibility and those kind of things is tough, but maybe things like cenotes down the road in Mexico, crystal clear underwater caves with a full light rig might be pretty cool. Maybe we should talk afterwards.
Oh yeah, no, I've got many images from cenotes with that just crystalline clarity.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And oh my God, that would just be remarkable. But yeah, you should do it.
All right, thanks so much.
You bet.
Very cool, very cool. Eric, I'm wondering, because you have this unique experience that spans from really high-end visual effects to high-end photogrammetry. Well, of course, one is fake and one is real. And I'm wondering, this gives you a unique perspective, and I'm kind of wondering how you contrast the two, but also, if you capture something using photogrammetry and there's you come back, after flying back from China or whatever, and you realize, oh gosh, there's occlusions here. Oh, I wish I need a little set extension to fill this out. Do you ever combine the two, or is that cheating?
Oh, I see. No. Well, no, I think. I try to be pretty faithful to what's there. Like, I don't really want to add, other people will add grasses and, make up for the foliage, and that's fine. I mean, if it, something that is kind of just basic foliage or trees or something, I guess that's ethically fine. But I don't want to do anything that crosses the line of what's the word? I don't know, of just being accurate, or I'm blanking on the word I'm looking for, but basically I don't want to make it inauthentic. I want to make it honest.
Yeah.
And so that's a lot of what I try to do. The one thing I will do is that when I arrive at a site that I want to capture is I'll walk it and see where the opportunities are for the VR experience, or it could be a film experience in Dome. And then so I understand what I think the final experience will be afford, or where the opportunities are, but I'll limit it to that, right? So anybody that does photogrammetry does the same thing. So yeah, so I would not put myself in a position where maybe I couldn't capture. But yeah, there's always things. I mean, capturing the real world is incredibly challenging because there's so much detail, I mean, who was it? I think it was oh shoot, the old VR, I'm forgetting now, but basically what the early VR, I will say this, the very early VR pioneers, NCG, I might add, same thing in CGI, is that, the whole art in visual effects is trying to be photoreal. And this is long before photoreal was that easy. It was more artistic at the beginning. And what that does is it gives you an appreciation of the rich complexity of the real world. Because if you're trying to fabricate it, and today with global illumination, all the rendering models that are out there, you can kind of get stuff automatically a bit easier, right? But the old days, we really had to think it through on what light does and what materials do and so forth. But boy, I'll tell you, you walk out back into the real world, and you go, wow, man, this is just unbelievable. I mean, I have a funny story about that. We were all, when caustics came out, this is when ray tracing was finally kind of adopted, is we were at dinner with all my CG geek friends, and my wife was there, who is not a CG geek. And we were all drinking wine, and somebody saw a caustic from the wine glass on the table, and it's like, hey, there's that new thing we can do. What's that called? What's that called? And we're all like pointing at it. And my wife goes, that's called reality. So, but it does
Yeah,
make you,
it's real time, it's 3D, it's
yeah.
yeah.
But there is that great appreciation that you get. So anyway, but photogrammetry is amazing because it gets you pretty far down the line. It doesn't get you all the way there, and that's what these next techniques, emerging techniques, are going to give us. I mean, my suspicion is in the future, not too distant, 2D image making will kind of, at least for capturing things on your phone of your family events, whatever, will kind of slowly migrate over to spatial things. And I hate using that word because I think Apple's kind of trying to make that a new term, but it's always been around. But it's true that you will share spatial events of things rather than compositional shots, 2D shots, and this is all going to be done from your phone too. I mean, you can already do splats from your phone that are not terrible. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, maybe architectural spaces, houses, and public spaces, they'll just have hundreds of cameras built in and be capturing everything spatially anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Uh,
and in other words, capture will be more transparent and more not accessible, but just kind of commonplace, I
oh,
think,
right, right.
in the years to come.
We have a question from Jeff Nee, who had to leave, but he can catch the video later.
Hmm.
He asks, how has the landscape of visual effects software tools changed over your career? For example, has rotoscoping gotten better or easier since Castaway? Have you tried any open source 3D animation visualization tools? If yes, in your professional opinion, what are the main selling points for commercial options, especially for those of us who just dabble in production here and there for our dome shows? Big question.
Well, I will make a confession. I've not worked in film, visual effects in film for quite some time because I've been doing these other avenues. But yeah, I can't say what the current state of software landscape is. I mean, I keep up with it generally, of course, but yeah, I think AI is going to change a lot, for roto or matching, anything like, I mean, all that's, yeah, that I guarantee that's come a long way from my days in it, I'm sure. But yeah, so I can't really comment, but I think yeah, I mean, I think procedurality is definitely advancing. Uh, Physical effects, like any kind of dynamics, fog, fire, explosions, that kind of thing, has gotten more modular in a sense, as opposed to having to kind of work it out from scratch. So I just, things are getting kind of at a higher meta level of orchestrations and processes, I would say, to my
Cool,
knowledge.
cool, cool, cool. Well, here's one for you. What's it like to go out into the field and capture some of these things? Are you taking hundreds of still photos? You fly drones? What kind of innovations are you using to actually do these captures?
Not so much innovation driven as it is methodology. It's just, and what I do say about photogrammetry, you could do what's the old saying about a million monkeys at a typewriter will create a great novel. I mean, you could kind of do that by just, machine gunning shots everywhere. You'll get something great. But once you practice it and you understand the methodology, it's basically a flow. That's all I'll say. The simple advice is just flow like water over your surface, evaluating what you want to see in the end, what's occluded, etc. But it's the linkage between the shots. It's important. If you work one area and you break and you go to another area, software's not going to know that. You need a bridge. So if you just flow, it's just a big process, and it's thousands and thousands of photos. I mean, most of the things that I showed today are probably between, I don't know, maybe 800. I think once you get 500 to 800 shots, it starts getting pretty robust. When you shoot in the thousands, it's a larger scale. So like if it's a room, like those caves, for instance, I'm forgetting what the shot count was on that. We went pretty high on those. But let's just say for one of those, you could probably do that in just a few hundred shots would get you something. Now, the other thing is splats and Nerf will require fewer shots. So that's the other beauty. And that's where it's using machine learning to do the infill. You were talking about, do you ever cheat it? Well, that's kind of you're letting, AI do a little bit of the infill there.
It can sort of interpolate if there's a missing piece or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. Also wondering, you're doing cultural heritage sites, you're doing national parks and like that. What's it like? I mean, do you have clients for some of this stuff? And how is your work being displayed? If you do have clients, I mean, you mentioned, I think, the visitor center for Yosemite, I believe. Any more case studies like that where your work has been put out there and used in a
Yeah,
bigger way?
if you go to blueplanetvr.com, there's I think it's called About, and that lists a ton of case studies. Like I just did a pretty cool project with a VR practitioner over in Amsterdam, and this is for a big museum show at the Meritus and the forgetting the one in Berlin. But anyway, it's about repatriated artwork and stolen artwork through the century. So we recreated some points of view, used photogrammetry in Bali and in Berlin to recreate stolen artwork. You see the piece of artwork in the display. It's set in a very neutral context. You put the headset on and it takes you into Berlin, or it takes you into Bali in the 1800s. And so that was a great project of showing, kind of taking you back into history. And so that one I'm happy to do. I don't chase after service projects like that as much anymore, but with the right project, I'm all about it, right? For me, it's all about trying to do work that's meaningful to myself or others, mostly.
Nice, nice. Well, one thing that's interesting to me is, a lot of the folks on this call maybe are working in a hemispheric format, full dome, digital domes. Cosm's format now demands more than that, more than a hemisphere, right? But then there's also VR, there's giant screen cinemas, with perhaps a more severe dome tilt than traditional dome theaters. And there's other ways, now to present immersive to people, including on your mobile device where you steer around with, by swiping. Um, where do you see all this going? Like, I mean, are we sort of, is there going to be like a universal sort of like where all of these different media are essentially being driven by the same master content? Like a transmedia kind of thing where you create a scene, it's like you build the world and then you shoot the world with a flat screen camera, or you shoot the world. Is that where you think this is going?
More so, well, yeah. I mean, that's what my current project is investigating. But how fluid that is what the question is, right? So if you want full real-time fluidity, and interpretation of objects or presentation of story or what have you, I mean, that's kind of a different animal. It really depends. I mean, what we haven't talked about so much is story, right? And that's a huge thing. So in visual effects, and it's funny, I remember back in the day, a lot of VFX fellow artists didn't always get this. It's like the common thing is VFX artists are very image driven. And it's like you kind of forget that you're actually telling a story. You're trying to be a storyteller visual storytelling. And so I remind my students of this constantly, like, well, if they have a question or they're stuck, well, what's the story point? What are you trying to express here? And that gets lost in the mix quite a bit. I was on Castaway. There was a compositor that was adding all the reef breaks on the island. And the story I always tell on that is Bob Zemeckis saw it in dailies and he goes, oh, it's looking really nice, guys, but let's add some more reef breaks for me. And next day came, there's more, and he goes, nah, you need more reef breaks. And this went on day after day after day. And the composer got really frustrated and he threw like 100 reef breaks in. It was kind of like a joke almost. And Bob looks at it and he goes, that's what I'm talking about. And he turns around and he points at all of us and he goes, you know why I'm asking this, right? And we all went, no. Not really. And he's like, this is the biggest crux of the whole story. This is the crux of the story, is that this is where, Tom climbs to the summit and he realizes he is truly trapped, right? This is would be a death-defying escape if he made it. So, and again, we forget that, so in visual effects, you always want the script next to you. You always want to respond to, context of the shot, continuity with other shots, but you also want to say, how can I tell the story visually really strongly? And the same thing happens in Full Dome, same thing happens in VR. So when you say, going back to your point, when you say if we can have content that is kind of very fluid and open-ended, you can, but you still have to have an intent, creative intent, that would guide you through it. And how do you handle that? What agency do you give if it's 6-degree real time? Are you going to give the viewer any agency? Who are they? Are they an observer? Are they a participant? Do they have agency? Do they not? And then how do you want to give them a path of emerging story, but also give them agency to maybe define things? So this is what we go over in my class over and over, is how you can be creative within this very open-ended parameter, right? World of parameters. So, and that's of course, again, a future thing too. That's what got everybody so excited when VR went mainstream 10 years ago, was, wow, this is a whole new tableau on how to tell story, right? And Full Dome as well, so it's that's the same. As a matter of fact, I opened my lecture probably with that same picture of the campfire. But I have an image of a campfire with people gathered around it. It's still a campfire where somebody's telling a story, right? It's eternal.
Right. Well, one last question, unless anybody wants to raise their hand. You have a lot of hands-on with the Apple Vision Pro. What do you think of that as a product, and where do you see that going? It's as we all know, VR isn't really hit mainstream yet, and it's all about having more adopters, but also not just more headset sales, more users, more use of those headsets, so that there's recurring content demand. How far away do you think we are from that? And is Apple on the right track to get us there?
The last question is the important one. Are they on track? Because the headset itself, hardware-wise, is stunning. I don't think I've ever owned a piece of technology that I've admired so much. It's just a remarkable thing. But they've done such an eloquent job of integrating all this disparate tech that exists in all these other headsets, or work. But they've done just a beautiful job of making it so not such a great experience. But how they're going to handle grow the market, we'll see that next year, and they bring their cheaper unit out. But even then, that's not going to be a $200, $300 item like Meta's offered. So it'll be the Apple faithful that will purchase that, probably $1,500 or so. And that's what it's going to take. I personally stopped worrying about the growth of VR a long time ago. I think it is a niche, medium, a specialty medium, much like Full Dome is, right? We'd love everybody to go to Full Dome and experience it. There's not that many venues, right, to support mass adoption of it, until the venue's there. But VR, the beauty is the venue is the headset. But in the case of Apple, it's cost prohibitive for many people. A lot of people don't like to put a headset on. A lot of people have issues with feeling a little edgy.
Oh yeah, cyber sickness, and or they trip over the cat.
Yeah, a lot of that is due to content creators not understanding what nausea is. But it's not something you can expect the public to embrace wholeheartedly. So I think it will remain as a niche, audience or market, and that's fine. But I do hope it moves away from the gaming centric approach that Meta's had, and that's what I'm banking on Apple to do, is to build up arts and culture. Will they do it? It's not clear to me yet, based on the way they present the content. So I'm hoping, and I hope to have conversations with them about it if I can, as time goes on. But so I have to sell in a gaming context on the Meta headset, and it's hard because that's not my audience.
Cool. Well, so appreciate your time today. Ryan, you want to bring us home?
Well, yeah, just absolutely astounded. Eric, thank you so much for just all of that. I really would love to know how you just end up on Castaway, but I feel like that's probably a larger question.
Where
How
do
does
we end
someone
up on
do something
anything?
like
It's
that?
all random, random events.
Random events. All right, so all of you there at home thinking, there's no way I'll work with Bob Zemeckis. Random events. Just will it, put it out there. It could happen.
It also helps being a master.
Yeah, keep working on it. Keep working
Just
on the
work.
thing.
Just hard work, hunkering down.
Exactly. Well, yeah, huge thank you to Eric for presenting all of that, giving us this awesome kind of